Yeah, for the introduction. I'm Roberto. I'm a design consultant at CG, and I'm really excited about this first panel today. We'll have 4 of them. This is the first one, because it's a topic that I think is really fundamental to any organization working globally. And it's also one that's really hard to get right. So the topic is localizing ICT, or localizing digital innovation. And as a design consultant, I get to help different companies, usually in the private sector, with this specific topic. How do we get close to people to understand contexts, to understand needs, motivations, so that what we build is fit for purpose for those audiences? So as we've heard earlier during the day, there are risks to not doing this, right? You can make poor design choices if you don't know about the people you're serving and who will benefit from your solution. So these poor design choices can lead to risks, can lead to the dark side that we heard about earlier, and we definitely want to avoid that. Luckily, it's 2024, and I think making the case for understanding people and getting closer to context is not as difficult to make as it was. And we're definitely doing that here, and we want to do it in the context of agriculture in the Global South. So there are some additional challenges which we'll talk about in this panel. So with that, I want to maybe move us on to having a quick introduction from our panelists, and I'll let you guys do that individually. I'll be standing here kind of awkwardly, but maybe I'll move forward so I can face you as well. So I guess we'll do a round. I'll let you guys introduce each other to the crowd, and please state your name, your role, and maybe some of the areas of activity that you're working with, and maybe briefly as an additional challenge. So if we can get started over here, perhaps with Catherine.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening to those that are online, joining us, online. I'm Catherine Ragasa. I'm a senior research fellow at IFPRI. I work on several topics related to technology adoption, and we know that, digital innovation is a very hot and very promising, innovation. So I work on several of these, issues. I'm happy to be here in the panel to present our experiences in working with local communities, our experiences on impact, evaluation, and learnings, from these experiences working with rural communities in the different countries that we work on.
Hi, everyone. Megan Steele, Junior Expert for Innovation Ecosystem Engagement for CGIAR Accelerate for Impact platform. The Accelerate for Impact platform is a market and science interface that's designed to leverage CGIAR's research and innovation, trying to co-design, accelerate, and de-risk investments in technologies for sustainable agriculture and climate action. So for us on this panel, when we talk about localizing innovation, localizing ICT, for us that means to be demand-driven, aligning our science and our partnerships with the needs of unique communities and what's really being asked for in the market, the needs of these growers and the people who will sustain the technologies. So we can do this by anchoring our science and partnerships in these needs and sustaining these beyond expiring grant periods or shifting institutional priorities, really trying to scale out our science to make a broader impact. So looking forward to the discussion, and thanks again for being here.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and hello to those online, whatever time zone you're in. I'm Josh Woodard. I'm the Senior Digital Advisor with USAID's Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. So my primary role is supporting USAID colleagues and partners around the world on how they are incorporating and integrating digital technology into our food security programming. I've been working in the digital and agriculture / rural communities space for close to 20 years now. And yeah, that's very briefly myself. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Josh. My name is, good morning and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Andrew Mack. I'm the founder and CEO of Agromobile. We are a private sector company that works to connect small farmers and their production with large supply chains around the world. We currently work in 3 countries, in Colombia, Tanzania, and Ghana. We provide a matching app, messaging, and backend analytics to make it easy for people who want to buy from small farmers to see them, and make it easy for small farmers to communicate in signal markets what they're doing and make those supply chains work better.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Pringle, and I am the Director of Programs for Farm Radio International. It's very nice to be here. Farm Radio International is an international NGO. We're a little over 45 years old. We love our name, but it can be a little misleading in the sense that we don't only do farming. We're a communication for development organization. So farming and agriculture, food security is a very important part of what we do, but maybe only about 50%. So we do a lot of work in climate resilience, environment. We're doing a big project right now on unpaid care. So we cover a wide range of issues that communication can be a positive force for dealing with. We're really about access to information. We're not only radio, but we are perhaps a low tech, or our foundation is around low tech. And radio is the center of what we do, but we use a lot of mobile phones, and we increasingly work in areas around data collection. And although we are an international organization, the focus of our work is at the moment entirely on sub-Saharan Africa. So it's a great name, but it can be a little bit misleading. At the center of what Farm Radio does is always content and programming. That's really what we contribute is great quality content and programming, not that we create, but that's created by our local partners. So we work through 3 main avenues. The first one is our network. It's very large, 38 countries, about 1,400 radio stations, and around 5,000 individual broadcasters. So it's a big space that we work in. The second pathway is around projects. And we've run around 200 projects in the last 12 years or so, working with a wide range of partners, many of which are here today. Again, contributing our communication and information expertise. And the third area, which I think is probably, if I refer to a local digital innovation, it's what I'll be thinking of today, is working at a national level at communication systems, and in particular with agriculture, developing platforms that provide farmers with a great extension service in conjunction with extension officers, and those platforms can be linked up across a whole country, providing that sort of beauty of something that is local and at scale at the same time. And we do that primarily at the moment in Uganda. So as we talk today, maybe those will be some of the examples or what I refer to when I'm thinking about a local ICT solution.
And I just want to make a remark before we get this one. All right, here we go. All right, before we get started, I want to connect the dots to another part of ICT4Ag, which is the ICT4Ag Inspire Challenge. We'll talk about that more this afternoon, but just to connect the dots here, we have 5 challenge winners who are applying the funding to grow their projects in different parts of the world, 5 different locations in the world. And one of the things that's a common thread between them is that they are not only practicing or are applying the grants in those locations, but they want to scale. They want to go to other regions. And I think within that is exactly the puzzle that you just mentioned, Ian, which is how do you know, or how do you balance paying attention to local context for relevance and universal factors that allow scale? So not an easy thing to answer, but that's one of the things that we'll be looking at with them. So I'll quickly frame a bit of what we'll talk about next. And it's really about the challenges, right? So we're talking about agriculture, the global south, rural areas, and technology, right? So that intersection has a lot of systemic challenges within it. And we'll explore a couple of branches. One is more on the operational side. So how do things actually happen when you go into places that are maybe less connected, maybe have a set of conditions that are more difficult? And then we'll explore the human side or the behavior side, which also has a set of very tricky challenges. But to start, I would like to first go into conditions, right? So, and for this, we want to talk about, with the panel here, with contribution from everyone, around how do we detect and then enable the right conditions in a place for innovation or digital innovation to flourish. And with that, I'm going to start with Megan. I'd like to get a bit of sense of how it works at the Accelerate for Impact platform, and what are the things that you do to enable innovation, maybe through selection, incubation, and acceleration.
Sure, thanks, Roberto. And I think it's great because the Accelerate for Impact platform, we spend a lot of time in this space trying to understand what are the conditions for a strong innovation ecosystem. In fact, we recently worked with the European Center for Development Policy Management on a white paper to identify conditions for exactly this. So if you're interested in that, find me after. I can send you the link to the paper. But I think something we can all recognize in this room is capital is so important to scale these solutions. And it has to be patient, given that it's context of the global south and smallholders. And it also should be blended. We need public funding to sort of mitigate the risk aversion of private sector funders before they're willing to get involved. But the CGIAR Accelerate for Impact platform, something that we really try to bring as a value add to this innovation ecosystem is reaching across the science market gap. Scientists and private sector actors, growers, all of these groups, they often speak different languages, literally, yes, but also, figuratively in the sense that they work on different incentives and all of that. So if we can create a space to sort of bridge these incentives and bring together people from both the private sector and scientists, we're able to create stronger innovation. So it's not only just about selecting innovations that maybe already have both of these perspectives, integrated into it, but it's about creating an environment where we can nurture both types of support. So we do this through different activities. We run webinars called Venture Out events, where we bring in, success stories of scaling research ideas out of the lab and onto the market, trying to nurture a spirit of entrepreneurship in our scientists, but also in our acceleration programs and innovation challenges. We try to bring in partners from the onset to make sure that not only they're demand driven, but there's also the needs of localized partners who are brought into this conversation about what are the priorities for innovation. So I think that's sort of our work in this space, and looking forward to hear from the other panelists on theirs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Megan. So I'm hearing a lot around the support network or actors and the partnerships that are necessary, maybe as a condition before any of this technology and any of the specific activities around hackathons and sort of encouraging ideas. So maybe I want to hand off the word now to Josh and see how you fit in the picture. How does USAID fit in the picture, and maybe working at scale and also having an eye on what might work in allocation or not?
Sure. So I think there's what USAID does sort of broadly, which is not necessarily focused on digital technology, right? And then there's where does digital technology fit within that? So I think one of the bigger changes as it relates to the food security space is the U.S. government puts out a global food security strategy every 5 years, I want to say. And the last one that just came out a couple years ago finally included for the first time a cross-cutting intermediate result, CCIR, for those who like those acronyms, which is focused on enhanced integration of digital technology. But I think what's important is not that we're just saying, all right, use digital technology more, but it's about thinking about where does digital technology play a role where it is going to be sort of contextually appropriate, where it's going to be deployed in a responsible way, where you're going to be thinking about the long-term life of whatever that solution is. And I've been working in this space for a while, and I know of those who have in the room who've been working in this space for a long time. A decade or so, like almost every digital solution was a donor would fund for something to happen. It happened, and then it would just go away, right? Because the donor funding would pull out. That still happens today, unfortunately. But I think we're on a better trajectory away from that. And from my perspective, I'm always trying to help colleagues and our partners think about that and think about, well, what is the long-term picture? I mean, developing and deploying a digital solution is relatively easy in the grand scheme of things. I mean, if you have enough resources, you can find lots of talented, affordable developers. If you want to develop something from scratch, which I generally would say don't do that, but it's easy enough to do it if you want to do that. But we really need to think about how is whatever that solution, how is that embedded within local systems, within, how are local actors actually owning that so that it's not something that's dependent on donor funding. And so, yeah, let me just keep it at that for in the interest of time.
I think, Andrew, you want to build on that?
Yes, I'd like to build on something that Megan said and something that Josh said. In terms of in terms of the kind of partnering and the patient capital you mentioned, I think that's really true. I think it's impossible to get where we need to go in a donor-only approach, but it also takes time for the private sector to come along to something that is new, something that wasn't born in their CIO's office, or that isn't sold to them necessarily by a very, very large company. If you think about trying to go into a large supply chain, we're working with Guinness in Ghana, for example. Guinness is a big company. They make long-term decisions. It takes you a long time to get known by them. Many larger supply chains are going to say, we're interested. We want to taste this. We want to try it. And that's a way in which public and private working together can bridge the gap. The other thing is that trust is an incredibly important part of all of this. And when we first started our work in Colombia many years ago, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't about us, that it was fundamentally about organizations that were already a part of the ecosystem. You talked about adoption. You talked about the trust that was necessary to get people to believe in the system and to really embrace it. And so when we started, one of the first things that we did was make partnership with a 400,000 person credit union called Comotrasan. We've been working with very large organizations that already have connections with the farmers that are much older than our company. Where we can say, yeah, we're coming in and we're going to help you, but we're coming in as a friend of the family, a friend of a relationship that you already have, so that it's not, hi, here's a new technology thing, or even worse, we're a bunch of gringos coming in trying to knock on your door and say, we figured out how to split the atom. No. What we're coming in to do is to say, the thing that you're doing, we're going to work with the people that you're already working with to help you work better and to address the number one problem that almost all of the farmers that we've talked to have said, which is, how do I get my stuff to market at a price that I can live with?
Well, thank you for that. I think, Catherine, you want to add something? We'll do a quick one and then move on to the next topic.
Very, very good. Just picking up on the idea of, it's easy to develop, mobile apps or, digital platforms, but then sustainability and getting impact from them, it's harder. And I'm here in the panel to contribute our experience on the impact evaluation perspective. I just concluded an impact evaluation study that looks at an ICT intervention bundle provided to many existing producer organizations in 7 districts in Malawi. And the idea of this intervention bundle is a combination of SMS push, video-based extension, call center, and hotline facilitation of radio programming, very similar to what Farm Radio Trust is doing, and also facilitation of market platforms and collective marketing, because it's very important. At the end of the day, producers, farmers would want, how do I earn income? How do I get to the market? So we have implemented this. The idea is to transform these producer organizations into ICT hubs, wherein they are the first implementers of improved management practices. They improve their incomes, they improve their productivity within their groups, and they become models in the community. So Farm Radio Trust Malawi implemented the intervention. We, as IFPRI, provided the learning and impact evaluation. So we just finished our midline evaluation, and I'm coming to the points that has been already raised. We already see impacts on income, and this is coming from shift from maize production to soybean, which is more profitable to the farmers. And that's one of the highlights and one of the messages that were promoted under the innovation or the intervention bundle. However, the midline evaluation also points to major weaknesses in the implementation and challenges in terms of operation. It's not easy. One of them, for example, is it didn't lead to high, uptake of this, services, and it didn't lead to a high, coverage. So there are many operational and implementation challenges that, went, ahead. So it's not, easy. So as a lesson, we have, to work, harder on organizational and human, capacity to make sure that the projects or business models that we have, the capacity to monitor, to implement, and evaluate, the programs. And lastly, those districts that achieve higher, incomes, it happened only to 2 districts. It didn't happen to the 5 districts. So it was a very interesting, evaluation, because even though the innovation is good, right, it can happen to some, it didn't happen to some. And what we are learning on those that happened, the districts where it had, positive impact, is that there's good market conditions that are working there, and good and better implementation and operations from the part of the implementing agency. So this is a call to do more of this learning, more of this impact evaluation, so that we can really know what works, what doesn't work.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we could spend a lot of time talking about this topic, but I want to move us on to the next one. And I think it'll sort of travel into these other topics as well. So we're going to talk next about some operational factors, right? So we talked about conditions, but then once you get started and through the long-term view of the innovation, you'll have to sort of face a lot of challenges that are unique to the place, that maybe have to do with availability and access to data, infrastructure, could be languages or literacy, all these things that are really important in guaranteeing or improving the chances of success of innovation. So here I want to start with you, Ian. So farm radio is in 38 countries in Africa, and that's quite a big push. I think what's maybe a little bit unique is that it's as you said, a low tech form of a low tech. And also that maybe now it has to coexist with other forms of tech, right? So other things have appeared over time. And I wanted to see how you have gone about doing the scaling in Africa, and what have you learned around operations?
Great, thank you for the question. I'm very happy that the title for today's event is ICTforAg, and that a lot of the framing of the discussions is around information communication technologies, because well, for selfish reasons, it's what we do, but also I think there's a strong tendency for us to get a little bit too wrapped up in what is digital. And there's no question that digital is the future. We integrate a lot of digital tools, but the basis of what we do is something that is analog and is more appropriate in a lot of rural contexts. So in many sub-Saharan African countries, forget about access to to the internet, let's talk about access to electricity, which is very, very low and continues to be low. So for at least the foreseeable future, those lower tech solutions are still critically important. And we do still need innovation in those spaces. Innovation is not only limited to digital technologies. Innovations can be much, in a sense, simpler things that are sometimes social innovations or socio-technological innovations. But to address a little bit more your question, our approach is to work through local actors, which I think is a critical part of all of the the areas that we're talking about today, in that we're not the ones who are producing the content. We're a content-based organization, but our role is to facilitate that creation of content by local actors. Now, there are 1,400 radio stations in our network, but there are at least 10,000 radio stations spread across those 38 countries. So there's an awful lot of room for growth. But there are local actors doing this work in every single rural community across sub-Saharan Africa. So if you want to talk about a model or a framework for scaling, it's a brilliant model and a framework for scaling, because in a sense, the infrastructure for that type of scaling is already done. What's required is to make more effective use of technologies like radio, or interactive radio as we like to call it, to make more effective use of those in order to achieve certain types of results. So in a sense, that's where our scaling comes from, is through working through mechanisms that are already there, are already scaled. What we're trying to do is to make sure that the innovations that actually result in tangible impact for farmers that those are actually introduced into those kind of environments. And those are real innovations.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Maybe passing the word on to Andrew and thinking of your journey in growing from Colombia to then East Africa and West Africa. What are the challenges that you've encountered? How have you approached them in doing this expansion in places that on the surface seem quite different?
So it's a great question, and the answer I'm gonna pick up on something that Ian just said. We're high tech, low friction. High tech, low friction. What does that mean? Think about Google. Think about Uber, right? You know exactly what you're trying to do when you go to Google. You know exactly what you're trying to do when you go to Uber. We designed AgriMobile as a platform, sitting down in community centers with farmers and saying, okay, what are the most important problems that you're trying to solve? And then how can we solve them with the least amount of friction? So somewhere less than 5 minutes to set up a profile, 30 seconds to post goods. You can match both directions. So you can both look for, you can both post products that you want to sell and look for inputs that you want to buy. Messaging to maintain engagement during the year, and at no cost to the farmer, right? So we want to try to take away as much friction as we possibly could, in part because we wanted to be able to work in a number of different areas. All of the challenges that we face around agriculture are not single crop problems. You rock the cassava chain in eastern Senegal, you still haven't solved agriculture at any kind of major scale, and you haven't had any kind of ability to reach into the knock-on effects of climate or of employment or of gender, which you could if you have a simple enough platform. So part of it for us was to try to create a simple and obvious place to start, to make it so that we could reach specifically into different chains, but also specifically into different demographic groups. So for example, if you've got a program that's aimed at women farmers between the ages of 25 and 35, we can message directly to those people. Why is that important? That's important because you really got a message that's for them. So you can tailor your message very nicely. And that keeps it simple for the people who are receiving the message. I think that that's the most important thing. We tried very hard to stay in our lane and not to do everything. So we work with financial institutions, we work with input suppliers, we work with people in the telecom sector who want to increase the amount of data usage at the edge, for sure. And they're, you know, we're, God willing, we'll be very soon making a couple of big announcements in that space with some very, very large players. That the key thing is it's you stay in your lane and you make it as easy as possible for the person who is on the recipient side on the farm to understand what you're doing, right? 45% of all the people who are AgriMobile users on the farmer side are either self-taught or they were taught by their own lead farmers, that are their own friends. We don't have the resources to go and build a huge agent network, but also we didn't think it could scale to the kind of impact that we really wanted if we needed one. So we wanted to make it simple, intuitive, obvious, and that's the kind of thing that makes it transferable from one place to another.
Wonderful, great insights there. Yeah, focusing on what's important, right? Filtering out the noise and using local actors, as Ina was also saying. I'm interested in the perspective from you, Megan, in how this happens in early stages, right? How do you get this mindset into people who are just sort of starting to think about how they're going to deploy their innovations?
Yeah, I think this is a great place for us to jump in. So picking up on something that Ian said, you know, local actors are already doing a lot of this innovation. There is a wealth of local innovation ecosystems that there's already solutions there that just need to be better connected, better funded in order to address the local, you know, conditions. People who are innovating in those contexts know their challenges better than anyone. Local actors, entrepreneurs, you know, governmental ministries, agri-food companies who are operating in this space, all of these people need to be a part of the conversation to strengthen early stage solutions. So this is one of the key pillars that the Accelerate for Impact platform works for, trying to valorize existing innovation. And so for our innovation challenges, we really try to build this into our methodology. We always start with a consultation workshop of bringing together local stakeholders and understanding what are the priority areas and what innovation already exists. So when we do these innovation challenges, For instance, we did Morocco in 2022, Uzbekistan last year. This year we're on to Egypt and Kenya. Even though our applications and the early stage solutions are coming from all over the globe, for Egypt, I think we had around 975 applications from 40 something countries. They're all going to address 5 or so key priority areas that we identified with the local stakeholders in Egypt. So I think this is really important to understand of, also making it scalable. So even though it's localized solutions, we can repeat this methodology in different environments and really take advantage of the innovations that already exist, but just try to level them up and connect them with CGIAR's capacity.
Yes, please go on, Josh.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to, building off of what Megan said, I think that, one of the things, if you look at the principles for digital development, and if you look at the new, the draft digital policy that Dina mentioned from USAID, both of them talk about understanding the ecosystem. And I think that's kind of implicit in what Megan was talking about. And I think that that is really critical, but on both a macro and a micro level. And I was just, a few months ago, I was talking with a partner of ours, and they were saying how every single farmer that they work with in that country has a smartphone. And okay, it's possible, like depending on the farmer group, but then we were out meeting with a group of fishermen, and I noticed one of them had like the next level up from the old Nokia, sort of brick phone. And I asked them, can you ask him how, like, is that his only phone, or because sometimes people have two phones? And he said, yeah, that's my only phone. And I said, well, how are you doing? Because they're supposed to be collecting and submitting data through WhatsApp. I said, well, how are you doing that? And he just figured out a workaround. So in his case, it was okay. He had a cousin or somebody who had a phone, and so he would have them send the stuff. But I think, really doing that, understanding not just, okay, aggregate the statistics, say in this country that X% of people have a phone, have a smartphone, like in the community where you're working, what does that look like? And the example that Dina mentioned in her remarks from Nigeria, just to quickly add, they did that in advance. So they did a landscape assessment looking at the ICT landscape in the communities where they're working to then determine what was going to be the most appropriate entry points, and who are the most appropriate local actors to work with so that this had legs beyond just the life of the activity.
Awesome. Lots of things to sort of deep dive into, maybe the cocktail hour. But moving us along to our next question, and it sort of connects a little bit to the factors that we were thinking about. So these frameworks, ways of thinking of moving into a new location, and the necessary actors that need to participate in that and having this long view. I want to focus a bit on this human side or behavioral side, which is less about the sort of practical, hard, sort of technical issues, but rather how do you get into a place, think of innovation, and also at the same time balance local culture, local norms, maybe ways of doing things that are really ingrained. And for this, I want to start with you, Catherine. Can you speak a bit about how do you travel this sort of tricky territory?
Very good. I will use again the ICT hub, example. It's very concrete so that I can, provide, concrete, very specific insights. So first, it has already been mentioned that consultation, rapid assessment, baseline survey, whatever your methodology, is very important to understand the local context, because it's only when you understand the local context, the capacities, the incentives, and also the current activities that they're doing, so that you can build on that one. Gender, for example, is very important. The gender norms, you have to understand, especially if you want to be gender intentional and you want to empower, local, communities. So the producer organizations that Farm Radio Trusts and the government Malawi are working on, they started with 118 groups. That's the focus of our impact, evaluation as a pilot. But the idea is to scale it up to more groups in more districts in Malawi. And for them to do that, there are several factors that would hinder or would enable or disable scaling this approach, right? One is the capacity of the producer organizations themselves. This is working with producer organizations to become ICT hubs. If you don't have strong producer organizations, if you don't have champions within those producer organizations, then your group-based approach or your ICT approach will not work. The second really is the connectivity. Again, coming back to what Josh and Ian were saying, if the local context, like if you survey and 63% of the members of the groups have cell phones and the others don't have, and only 17% of them have smartphones, and the other 83% doesn't have a smartphone to enable mobile and more advanced tools, and a few of the groups has less than 20% of their members who have cell phones. So how can you create an ICT hub within these groups with that limited accessibility and connectivity? So looking at the local context would be helpful, and then adjusting your approach so that it caters to what's the local condition. Therefore, from the impact evaluation, Farm Radio Trust and the partners there are adjusting their methodology and creatively combining and integrating simpler, more medium, and more advanced technologies to cater to that local condition.
Let's build on that and talk to Ian a little bit. So I'm curious in the responsibility that comes with reaching so many people with radio. How do you create a framework or guidelines or ways of helping people who are going to generate content on the communities to be responsible to, again, travel this tricky territory of information, but also being mindful of the local norms and culture?
Well, I guess the main way is that in our approach, it's always the local actors, the local radio stations and their partners. So we're a communication organization in the sense that our expertise is communication. But if we're talking about agriculture, we're always working with agricultural experts. And those would be farmers as well as folks from research centers or extension officers. So there's that element that it's always local people who are doing that work. What I would point to is that if you're going to do programming that has particular outcomes, rather than the type of media that we all tune into frequently, where the outcome is not new knowledge or a change in practice. Most people here, probably a lot of you don't tune into the radio these days anyway, but if you do, you're not tuning in to necessarily learn something or to change a practice, which is quite different than the type of programming that we do or that you're referring to in Malawi with Farm Radio Trust. So those local actors are the ones who are doing the programming, but they're also going through a process of designing those programs. And that design space is critically important because in a design space, ideally what you want is you want the policymakers, you must have representatives of the community, and you have to have subject matter experts. So ideally, if your programs are really well designed and they're designed in a collaborative fashion with the right knowledge groups in the local community, and with the participation of your target audience, you shouldn't really have a lot of problems, to be honest. Those should be very well grounded. They should be culturally appropriate. You'll be drawing on local context, local solutions, addressing local problems. And so you can replicate that anywhere, all over the world, those kind of design process, user-centered design process. You can do that all over the world, but you've got to start somewhere and make sure that you are doing them in the places that really count. And local language is critical for so many reasons, not least because if you're using a local language, you're validating and valorizing the local context. And you're saying to people, this is yours, it's in your local language. And if you're doing that work in somewhere like Uganda, our network of platforms in Uganda, there's 12 of them. Every single one is in a different language. And we could add on another 12 at least, or maybe another 24 that would all be in distinct languages. So that's really important. But to make the connection back to digital, if you want to do that kind of programming in local languages, the possibilities of digital to be able to help us to navigate the differences between those local languages and the languages that we might be using are huge in terms of automatic speech recognition, being able to do transcription and translation, which is something that we're working with IFPRI. So just that connection to those newer digital technologies is also really important.
Yeah, a lot of interesting routes to explore there with that new layer of technology, right? And we'll hear about AI later on in the day. But I think, you know, what I'm hearing from you is that going back to the idea of local actors and these frameworks for involving the right people, that almost acts like a safety valve or not guarantee, but maybe really got you in the, put you in the right foot to make the right content and let people own it and benefit from it. Yes, Andrew.
I'm just going to jump in and put in a plug for money. Money is a great motivator. And what we found all around the world is that where there is a chance, if a third of the goods that you are producing don't get sold or get sold at such a low price that it's not viable for you and your family, and you are literally telling your children, leave the farm, go to the city where we have no social safety net and you have no job prospects, but do that because it's better than staying here. Money is your driver, right? So what we focused on from the very beginning is how do we try to make it possible for people to see the value, see the money in it. So the problems in a lot of instances, the problems about who is going to do the training, it's a money problem. People who have the phone are going to be mini aggregators in the areas, or you're going to leave your farm where you don't have service. You're going to go to where you buy beer or jeans or seeds, and you're going to get service there. Right? If there is a chance for you to make more money, then you're going to solve that problem, right? Second thing is that our big partner in the telco space in Colombia is Telefonica, right? Why is Telefonica interested in AgriMovil? Well, you got voice clients at the end of the road. You turn a voice client into a data client, 15 times the revenue, money, right? It's money for the farmer. It's money for Telefonica. They can offer insurance. They can offer loans. They can offer transactions. I mean, that's juice. Everybody's concerned about the lack of connectivity, and it is certainly a problem. But think about it. You can buy a smartphone for $25 in Nairobi right now. The problem of connectivity is going to be solved. Maybe not in the next 3 years, maybe in the next 5 years, but every farmer that really wants to have connectivity can have it. So the question is, can we help them with something that is simple enough to get them over the hump, to choose digital? And the quickest and easiest way to do that is to connect them to their own money, right? Now, in terms of local language, we looked at this when we first started up in Ghana. We talked with all of our constituents in northern Ghana and said, what language do you want? We'll put you up in whatever language you want. And what everybody said to us is English, because there are 16 different languages, and the one that we are going to go to market with is English. And Tanzania, it's Swahili. In Colombia, it's Spanish. We just wanted to make it as simple as possible. And the way you do that, again, is to take away the complexity so that moving from one language to another is as easy as possible, and putting up in a new language is a matter of weeks, and putting up in new products. Oh, that's the other thing. Nobody produces only one good. If you're a coffee farmer in Colombia, you produce other things besides just coffee. And if you're talking to the Coffee Federation, which we have many times, you're talking to the Coffee Federation, they want to make sure that their farmers do well at times when coffee is not doing well, right? So one of the things that we wanted to do was to make it as easy as possible for people to put up all of the products that they're looking to sell, right? Using the same exact interface so that it's super simple. And so you can take a look and you can see, are women getting the same prices as men? What does the flow look like, right? Because then you can start to do the kinds of things with AI and predictive analytics that really are going to push the field.
All right, thank you for that, Andrew. I think, yeah, going back to first principles almost, right? And what are the incentives, which we heard about earlier in the day, and how do you prioritize? How do you focus on what matters? So we have a little bit of time left. I want to do one round. Okay, if you can fit in a quick comment, Josh.
I have to make a plug.
Okay.
last year, for those of you who attended, we launched an inclusive digital design toolkit, which is focused on food security. It's an amazing resource. Maybe I'm partly biased, but I think it's really great. It has a deep focus on intersectionality, which I think, if we look at how we are moving to Andrew's point about getting to near universal access, that takes an understanding of the intersectional sort of pushes and pulls that might be enablers and disablers of access to technology, affordability of technology. So if you go to usa.gov/digitalag, it is on there along with many other resources. So please check it out.
Please be sure to check that out. So now moving on to the last bit of sharing from each of you. Very quickly, I want to ask one by one, if you had to recommend one thing about localizing ICT from maybe an anecdote experience, what would that one thing be to try to get it right? And I'll start from the opposite end here with Catherine and work our way over here.
Understanding the local context first, that's the starting point, very important. Second, sorry, I'm giving you two. Organizational capacity and human resources to implement, to monitor, to evaluate the project and to manage either a project or business model. That's very important. Lastly, we have to do more investment, do impact evaluation, do learning on successful and unsuccessful scaling efforts. It's only when we can learn what works and what doesn't work if we do those.
Okay, Catherine got a pass, but we have to focus on like a quick response. So Megan, please.
Sure. I would say, the one piece of advice for localizing ICT is to partner early and often. For us, it's about demand driven, as I said, and working with local innovation ecosystems on joint development of technologies, on incubation, on capacity building. All of that is super essential to make sure that we can squeeze the most value out of all of the innovations that already exist within CGIAR, the ones that are going to be developed in CGIAR, and also innovations already at work in the innovation ecosystems. So partnering, I think, is our piece of advice.
Partnering. All right, Josh.
So I will give a one, not the one, in my mind. But I would say, I think, listen, really understand the ecosystem, design with that in mind, and adapt. The adaptability is key. If you have an idea in mind and you're thinking, okay, we're going to do this and we're just going to do it because we're set on it. And I know sometimes that can, depending on different, especially if it's donor funded, sometimes there's a feeling like there's not the flexibility to adapt. But yeah, I think being open to adapting and understanding what is fitting and how does that, again, to what I said earlier, what's the long term here, that it's not just about standing something up. The standing it up is easy. The getting it to be there in 10 years, 20 years, that's the harder part.
Long view. Wonderful. Andrew. If you can share here.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, mine is blinking. I'm sure it's a bad time. Thank you. I have two pieces. The first piece is begin with the end in mind, right? Which is the sale, which is reaching. You need to have both pieces of the equation working, the seller and the buyer, right? No one does ag for exercise, right? No one does ag for exercise. And before you could even have a conversation about sustainable and regenerative, you have to have a conversation about whether this is worth my doing, right? So begin with that end in mind. The second thing is, especially if you want to go wide, remember my mother's rule. My mom's 85. If I have something that is too complex for me to explain to her before she gets bored, it is too complex to scale. Right? Okay? Don't bore your audience. Don't overcomplicate it. Get the first thing done right. And then remember who's going to be the buyer and work with both sides.
It's hard going last because I feel like I was going to say listen to farmers, that fundamentally that's the key thing for us is you have to listen to farmers. And it sounds so obvious, but at the same time, it is remarkable how often people don't actually listen to their audience. It's shocking. I was going to say that. Then I was going to say that you should focus on the value, because I think what I take away from Andrew's comments really reaffirms that idea that you have to focus on value creation in all of this work. And it's not just money, but you have to create a tangible value for people if they're going to use it and if they're going to sustain it financially or otherwise. But what I will say finally is just that access to information is a human right. And we have to have solutions that are available now that can meet that human right of all people to access to information. Information is critical for livelihoods and for farming, for health, for everything. And if we don't meet that right on a universal basis, then we're not going to meet it in 10 years with digital solutions. So focus on the human rights and the inalienable right of all people to have access to information. And we have to figure out how to do that now, today, for everybody.
Amazing. Thank you all. I think maybe it challenges the title of the presentation around ICT, but I think this is it, right? So how do you focus on human needs and outcomes on the long view, and technology is an enabler for that. With that, I want to move us on to questions. We have maybe 8 minutes left, and we'll take questions from the crowd here, but also digitally if someone can help me identifying those. But if you raise your hand, someone with the mic will find you. Do we have any questions? There we go. Here is in the center. And please state your question, and if you want someone specific to answer it, please state that name.
It's flashing. I don't know if it's working.
Push it again.
Testing.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you. This is a really important conversation. I was happy to hear about trust and inclusion. And some of my research and work has looked at how farmer to farmer for smallholder farmers, that connection is really important. What are the barriers for trust, for social cohesion, and social capital to be able to minimize risk, access inputs and output markets? I'm wondering for ICTs, what role and examples you've seen for connecting those users to other users and building those connections so, say, product can increase, so accessing the markets, but also some of those social connections and addressing those barriers.
Go on, Andrew.
So we did a meeting in outside of Arusha in Tanzania, right? And bunch of onion farmers. And one of the first questions that I asked the group was, okay, so are you competitors? Are you collaborators? What's the relationship between all the farmers in the room, right? And because you could put goods up on the platform and you're technically selling against your neighbor, right? And what was really interesting is they said, there's nobody coming to pick up my onions. There are only people coming to pick up our onions. So the more we can get our onions visible and the better price that we can get for our onions, the better our community will do. And so in fact, the technology can be a social cohesion mechanism if we do it right. It also allows the people who are, we had a guy in Colombia, great, with the hat and the sash, and like about 70. And when we were doing one of our very first roundtables, we were talking about what we were doing, and he said, I don't quite understand this, but I have a 9-year-old who is going to totally crush this. She's going to totally understand it, and I know that it's something that we need. So I think that you're building intergenerational connections, but you're also building connections within the group, because when it comes down to it, people don't see themselves as autonomous units. They can't survive economically as autonomous units.
Catherine wants to add a perspective here.
Follow up, and it's very, very consistent to what Andrew was saying. The also reason why the approach in Malawi is group-based approach to exactly nurture that connectivity and also the trust among the farmers. And one of the messages is really to promote collective and group marketing, and it was working. So I said earlier that we see impact, positive impact on income. And that impact on income is coming from the shift from maize to more expensive soybean, right? Again, it's coming from the value creation. But we also see evidence that those who were engaged in collective marketing, they were able to achieve or receive higher prices for their soybean, for their groundnut, and maize. If I can, remember, those figures. For example, for maize, they were able to, to get 550 kwacha per kilogram for those that are in collective, marketing. But those who were not in collective, marketing, practicing collective marketing, they were able, to get only 500 kwacha. So this is, real evidence of what's, working on behind, the scene of whether you do collective, collective, marketing or not, or if you use, this, utilize those trust and connectivity within the groups.
All right, many hands here. Let's start over here. Yeah, can we get a mic?
So
We want to. Over there? Yeah. Yes, you had your hand up, right?
Thank you. Hi, fantastic panel. I just wanted to ask, and have met or worked with many of you. This is wonderful. Speaking of scaling, and nothing kind of starts ex nihilo, there's been a lot of discussion and research around system mapping, starting with a system that's there. Can you guys speak a little bit about learning from failure? Or one of the questions I like to ask first is, why hasn't this worked before? And how are we systematically integrating lessons from what didn't work or what didn't happen?
Well, I can speak just a little bit from our experience in the CGIAR Accelerate for Impact platform. So our platform is relatively young. We launched in 2021, and this was the same year that venture capital into agri-food tech startups was record, I think, over $50 billion. So I think this was our response of saying, we really need to take more advantage of, the private sector as partners in this sort of scaling effort. But the CGIAR Accelerate for Impact platform is one part of CGIAR's scaling efforts, and I know you can speak to this probably as well, in knowing that CGIAR scaling has a whole innovation portfolio management system that we try to integrate ourselves with. So we're constantly learning, and this is something that we're tackling now as we see the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal horizon really coming. We're trying in the next 5 years to understand how to be better demand-driven and sort of reorient our scaling strategy to make sure it's sustainable past just, putting it in a research paper and saying the innovation is complete. So that's from our side.
Maybe time for one more over here, please.
I was gonna.
Oh, you're gonna. So
Yeah,
sorry,
I'll just quickly. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to that. I'll just say for one, when part in the development sector in particular, I think there's oftentimes a misalignment of incentives. And I worked for many years at an implementing partner, and I can't tell you how many times either my organization or competitor organizations where there was a follow-on to an activity, and there was something that was being done, using digital technology. It actually was working well, and people bidding on the follow-on all propose completely different things because they want to be able to say, well, we're better, we're different, we're going to do this. And so that's a problem. And there's many others, but.
So now your question, please.
Yes, please. Thank you. Excellent panel and excellent exchange. I really appreciate it. My question is for Jan. I have worked for decades in Africa, but I'm now in the Middle East and North Africa. My question is about the creation of the platform for the Radio International, creation of the platform for extension services. I'm very, very interested because lately, Digital for You and all these new platforms and everything that we've been creating is that it's taking a farmer to look into TikTok or any other digital platform and thinking that what works in Canada for palm fruit, for instance, or stone fruit, works in Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt. So we are seeing really a huge problem as a result of that. So my question to you is, although you work in Africa, how can I take advantage? And if you can tell me like quickly, what are the SWOT, if there's, around Radio International, for extension services, because I want to be creative, I want to be innovative to tell farmers, you need that extension services. This fatigue is, and this TikTok digital is working against you. Thank you.
I think it's a very interesting space, and I'm very happy to speak afterwards, about it. But, I was recently spent a little bit of time in Nepal, and radio listenership has essentially almost fallen off a cliff and is for us headed in the wrong direction. And what people were saying was that, Facebook is the new radio and YouTube is the new television. But the problem with that, despite the fact that people are still doing it in local languages, is that it's not very well grounded in the local context. And there's really no professionalism, if you will, or there's very little in the way of process that's happening to guarantee that the content that's being created really is good quality content. So I think those are major risks as we move from traditional media, because one of the beautiful things about traditional media like radio is that it is local by nature. It is inherently local, and it will always be local. Now, one of the problems you're going to face in other jurisdictions is our model only works where you have a relatively free press.
Great way to end. Elmos are coming up.
Sorry, just
I
one
think-
question online. Can I do it, Roberto?
Sure, it's very short. I mean, we're at
Yeah,
minus
just
9
okay.
seconds.
Okay. Can you share examples of successful partnerships between development agencies and local governments to enhance ICT adoption in agriculture?
Oh, that's a very broad question. So I suggest that maybe we end it here, and there's a chance to continue the conversation in further sessions and also in the cocktail hour. Thank you very much for your questions, for your attention. And I just want to say that we're going to take a break now. There's a coffee break until 11:15. And the next block will be focused on AI, which I'm sure you're all very excited about. So thanks again. And please a round of applause for our panel.